How leaders can enable positive change from within. Abstract. The article explores how organizational systems can unintentionally disadvantage certain groups and stifle innovation, despite being designed for stability and consistency. Drawing on research in systems thinking and social change, it outlines strategies for organizational leaders to identify and challenge systemic barriers from within. Key steps include collecting quantitative and qualitative data to reveal hidden biases, reframing narratives and assumptions through education and awareness, co-creating equitable policies and practices with stakeholder input, and fostering accountability and celebration of progress through humble, collaborative leadership that engages the entire system. The article demonstrates how even entrenched cultures can transform to cultivate greater fairness, inclusion, and innovative potential. Ultimately, it argues that by continually aligning organizational values with evolving equitable practices, a more just future can emerge. Organizational systems are complex and influence how employees behave, solve problems, and envision opportunities. While meant to foster stability and consistency, systems can unintentionally disadvantage certain groups and stifle innovation over time. However, systems are human creations that can be reformed through human effort and leadership. Today we will explore research on system dynamics and social change, then offers practical strategies for how organizational leaders can identify and challenge systemic barriers from within, in order to foster a more equitable and forward-thinking culture. Research on systems thinking and social change. Systems thinking concepts provide insight into how organizational cultures form and are maintained over time. Pioneering research by Meadows, 2008, described systems as interconnecting sets of elements that reinforce one another through feedback loops. Once established, systems self-organize to resist change through balancing feedbacks that preserve stability. Senge, 2006. However, systems are also open to outside influences that can spark transformation through small shifts in assumptions, policies, or power structures. Wheatley, 2006. Studies have shown how social movements have successfully utilized grassroots organizing, coalition building, and nonviolent civil disobedience to pull unjust systems into a new paradigm of fairness and inclusion. Ackerman and Duval, 2000. King, 1963. This research suggests that with patience and empathy, even entrenched cultures can evolve for the better through leadership that aligns a system's goals with its humanity. Identifying systemic barriers through data and storytelling. The first step for leaders is to acknowledge the possibility of unintended biases within their organization's culture and policies. Rather than making accusations, leaders should foster open discussion using anonymous surveys, focus groups, and one-on-one interviews to collect both data and lived experiences. Quantitative metrics like demographic diversity in roles, promotions, and pay can indicate patterns worth exploring. Thomas and Ely, 1996. Qualitative storytelling allows less visible barriers to surface, such as feelings of isolation, microaggressions, or an unsupportive work-life culture. Elgin, 1993. Regular, pulse checks keep leadership accountable to progress. Over time, data and narratives can reveal where the system may disadvantage or disenfranchise certain identities, and suggest reforms to consider. Reframing narratives and assumptions through education and awareness. Once areas for improvement emerge, leaders must work to shift underlying narratives and assumptions. Research shows the power of reframing issues as opportunities for growth rather than personal attacks. Lakoff and Johnson, 1980. Rock, 2009. Strategies include hosting courageous conversations to build understanding, providing mandatory allyship and unconscious bias training, highlighting role models from underrepresented groups, and emphasizing the business case for diversity through inclusive policies that retain top talent. Herring, 2009. Thomas and Ely, 1996. Regular company-wide communications and discussion guides can reorient cultural framings over the long term. Leaders must also model vulnerable self-reflection to build trust in the change process. Co-creating equitable policies and practices armed with new awareness. Leadership should invite input on potential reforms from all levels. Open policy labs allow weighing trade-offs to establish the fairest approaches. Research finds people support reforms more when involved in crafting solutions. Healy and Coate, 2001. Ruckelshaws, 1989. Frontline employees have keen insight into barriers experienced by customers and peers. With appropriate confidentiality, their candid input is invaluable for reform design. Pilot programs then test new approaches, with stakeholder feedback driving iterations prior to wider rollout. Collaboration builds buy-in for positive changes versus top-down decrees facing resistance. Bryson, 2004. Shine, 2010. Ongoing assessment ensures policies fulfill their mission as the culture continues evolving. Challenging inertia through accountability and celebration even with initial buy-in. Established systems exert pressures toward the status quo. Research finds clear metrics, reporting structures, and consequences increase the likelihood of sustained reform. Ogden and Lin, 1995. Sitkin, 1992. Leaders should establish diverse stakeholder councils, ombudsperson roles or report cards to monitor progress. Elevate issues facing marginalized voices and hold all leaders accountable. Success stories showcasing reformed policies in action can challenge naysayers by appealing to organizational pride and competitive spirit. Recognition programs celebrate champions of inclusion to encourage norm shifting. Holidays, learning events, and informal spaces also foster the community building vital to supporting ongoing evolution. Dobbin and Kalev, 2016. Ely and Meyerson, 2010. Progress realizes the organization's values in practice versus theory alone. Case study. Reforming an infrastructure company. A large infrastructure engineering firm conducted diversity assessments revealing pronounced disparities in salaries and promotions impacting women and people of color. Leadership launched courageous conversations inviting all 5,000+ employees worldwide to discuss challenges. This informed training addressing unconscious biases which became mandatory annually. Next, a policy innovation lab including diverse frontline staff redesigned performance metrics, parental leave, and flexible work arrangements. Quantitative targets and dedicated diversity officer roles increased representation at all levels within 5 years. External consulting aligned recruitment and mentoring. Regular State of Inclusion town halls celebrated milestones and addressed new issues constructively. While imperfect, this process engaged the entire system in strategically reforming barriers, earning industry recognition as an exemplar of sustainable, equitable growth. Conclusion: organizational cultures develop unintentionally over time, yet remain malleable through humble, collaborative leadership. Research illustrates how systems thinking, data collection, reframing narratives, collaborative policy design, accountability structures, and celebration of progress can spark positive change from within. While challenging, leaders who acknowledge imperfections and invite all voices to the table can disrupt systemic barriers in a manner building understanding and long-term buy-in versus resistance. With patience and community building, even entrenched cultures can transform to foster fairness, inclusion, and unleash their full innovative potential. A more equitable future emerges when leadership guides organizations in continually living their values through evolving practice each day.